In this video, I'll be breaking down my C++ code which I had created for the company manager desktop application. You will see how a project can be made in Qt. I'll also be explaining to you how the backend interacts with the front end, which is the UI. You will get an idea of all my classes and how they work with each other. You will also learn about constructors and passing objects between classes and different files. And you will see how a full desktop application can be put together. Let's start. So this is my UI here, and I'll just give a company name. I'll call it Vinayak Inc. So I'll assign my name as the leader. So type it correctly. 647 my phone number, and then 4 employees I manage. So I'll just name 4 of my subscribers. So Bianca, Aditya, Ajay, and Akshay. And then I'll say their phone numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to actually make a mistake here on purpose. So if I press add employees now, you see how there's a prompt, extra names and phone numbers, because I'm missing a phone number or I have one extra name. So if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll add them. And then I press next here. So now it takes us to the main page where you can see the company display here. So these 4 people report to me. So I'm going to add some more people. I'll say Ram, Sham, and Sean. I'll say their numbers are 7, 8, and 9. I'll say they report to Ajay. If I press hire, they now are under Ajay. Let me hire some more people. David, Mike, and give a Indian name, Dilip. So give it phone numbers 10, 11, and 12. And then let's say that these report to Ram. Hire employees, and then now we have this tree here. So you can hire people like this. I'm going to edit a name of an employee. I'll say Ram, edit his name. So since the Ram exists, it says found employee Ram, and then it'll give you this here. I'll call him Rama, and his new phone as 45, and then finish. So now it'll update here, as you saw. I'm going to now make a mistake on purpose, so I'll say Ajaya. So it says employee not found because his name isn't there, right? But yeah, so that's how that works for the edit employee. Now let me fire someone. So let's see, I want to fire Sean, okay? So Sean is a leaf node because no one reports to Sean. So when I press next, it'll give you only these 2 options. Like I can replace Sean with someone else at his position, or I can let him go. So if I fire employee, press next, proceed, he's gone. Now if I press Sham here, if I want to fire him, I'll say, it'll give me the same 2 options because he's also a leaf node. I'll say replace with someone new. So I'll say the new employee in Sham's position is Kevin, and his phone number is 56. So Sham will become Kevin now. So you're replacing at the same position. Now let me fire Ajay. Alright, Ajay has people under him, right? So we can't fire him because he's not a leaf node, so we need to actually do more. So we can replace, but that's easy. I've covered that before. And you can fire, promote one, or promote them all. So now, I'm gonna press this one here, proceed. So you see how, so now I want to fire Rama, right? Let me fire Rama and promote one person under him. So I'm gonna promote Mike. So we have these 4 options to promote where Rama was. So Mike will go here, and then Mike's employees will now be David and Dilip and Kevin. So replace, and then, so Mike went there, and then David and Dilip and Kevin are here. Now I want to change boss. So let me say Kevin's boss is now me. So change boss and promotion is something similar. So the employee reports to Mike, right? Because Mike is now here, and then new boss is Vinayak. So now you see how Kevin got promoted. But now let's say I want to demote someone. I want to demote Dilip because it's bad performance. So I'm going to make his new boss David. So he just got demoted there. So that's the breakdown of the UI, how the program works. And now let's go into the code. This is the class diagram. So for the employee class, the variables are first name and phone number. The node class takes in an employee class along with pointers to children and parent. It has methods to set the children, set the parent, return the employee, edit the employee details, which calls set first name and set phone number. Next, the company class takes in a node because the root of my employee structure, which is an n-array tree, and I've made a video on that before, that is a node object because all the other employees are pointers from that node. For my company class, the methods here are quite straightforward, like set name, set the leader, which assigns the root node, return the leader, add children, get name, find node, etc. The most important method here is the delete node, which contains my algorithm to delete a node from an n-array tree, which I have also covered in a separate video. I've used essentially the same algorithm, just that the arguments have changed a bit, but the underlying architecture is the same. So if you want to know more of that, then I recommend you check out my other video. On the right, I have my UI classes. So each window in a Qt application is represented by a class. If you saw my short video, I talk about how to actually run through the program. So when you first start the program, it opens the main window. Here you just put the company name and then you call setup company window. This will open a new window where I create the instance of my company class with that name. So I don't actually have an instance in main window. Inside setup company window, I have my methods to set the leader and set the employees that report to the leader. If you noticed also in my short video, when I press next here, it opened the third window. That is the edit company window. And what I do is I copy my company object from the setup company window class to the edit company window class, and it's passed in the constructor. So I don't need to write a separate method. It does it as soon as the edit company window class is invoked. And I'll show you that how to do that in my code breakdown. The edit company window is where I do all the hiring, firing, promoting, and changing names and so on. So obviously this class is the most important class. This will interact with the company class and the methods from that. So the methods here are update company display, replace employee, find boss button clicked. The methods which say employee search button clicked, if it has the word clicked in it, that refers to the button object. So when I click the button, what should the program do? Next, let's move on to the activity diagram. This is my activity diagram. So when I first open the exe file, that calls the main window class where you define the company name. The name is then passed to the setup company window class where I define the leader name and phone number. I then set the leader. I then define my names and the phone numbers of all the employees that report to the leader, which calls in the parse employee inputs method that checks if the names and the phone numbers, the vector is the same size. Then I add the children there. That calls my edit company window class where I return the employees and then update my company display. So that's my last window. Now in this last window, I have 4 tabs, which are hire employee, fire employee, change boss, and edit employee. So in the hiring method, I just add names and phone numbers. I add my supervisor. I check if the node is existing. If it is not, then it'll prompt you to add and fix the name again. If it does exist, it'll check the size of the names and the phone number vector. If it is the same, then it'll proceed to hire them, but if not, it'll give you a prompt. The fire employee works in a similar manner. I get the employee name, the number of children, and then based on how many children nodes are there, it'll enable and disable specific buttons, and I'll show you that in the program. And then it'll call in the fire method, which will choose either firing them or replacing or promoting all the nodes or just promoting one node. And that's covered in my algorithm video of deleting a node. Next, there's change boss, where I just assign the employee name to change the boss of. I find the node. Is it the leader? If it is, then it's kind of hard to change the CEO, right? So I don't allow that. You just have to change the boss of someone below the CEO, because the CEO is the big boss, right? There's no one above the CEO. That's what I mean. Then you assign the name of the new boss, and then you just check if the name is existing, and if it does, then I detach the employee and then reassign it to the new parent. Lastly, there's the edit employee method where I just search up the employee if it finds the nodes, and then I can assign a new name and a new phone number. And after doing any of these methods, I call the update company display, which updates the view in real time. You can download the project from my GitHub link in the description below. And when you open the project, you have to open it in Qt Creator. I'm talking about the source code. If you just want to download the exe file, that's in a separate link on my website. But here I'm going to focus on the source code. So this is the project's layout in Qt. And let me first distinguish the front end versus the back end. So the UI is the front end here. Let's say if you have a website, what the client will see is the front end, right? Same logic here. So edit company window.h, main window.h, setup company window, those classes are my front end, which interact with the back end, which is company, employee, and node. So the way I integrate my backend into my front end is that I made a folder called src inside headers and sources, and then I just added the files respectively. In C++, you need to separate the headers and the sources file, because the header file just contains the names of all your methods and variables, and the actual code goes into your sources file. With that being said, let's now dive into the code. Okay, now we're in Qt and we can begin with the code breakdown. So in the project file .pro, I have all my other files included. Moving on to the backend, let's start off with the company header file. So company includes tree node because tree node includes employee. I'm calling tree node objects here. The root is the leader of the company. The found node is the node which is returned from calling the find node method, which is a recursive method. Moving on to employee, it's just name and a phone number and a bunch of methods here to set the name and so on. Tree node includes employee and it has an employee object along with its children, which correspond to other tree nodes and a parent as well. In the source files of my backend, starting off with employee, these are methods to simply set the first name, set the phone number, print details, return the first name, along with the constructor. So if I don't have any arguments for the name and the phone number, it'll just set the first name as a name and phone number will be not available. But obviously I'm going to pass in two strings, so it'll set the first name as a string and the phone number as a string as well. Next, in tree node, I have a method to return the employee name, to edit the employee details, which takes in two string arguments and then calls in the employee class method set first name and set phone number. Next, I'm just returning the children of the tree node, the parent. I'm assigning my children here, parent, and that's it. For company, this is where most of the code is for the backend. Let's first go all the way to constructors. So if I don't assign a company name, it'll just set the company name as company. But if I do assign a name, it'll set the name as the string argument here. Set the leader just assigns two string arguments, creates a new tree node, and then edit the employee details to those arguments here. To return my leader, I just have return root. To add children, I pass in two vectors of names and phone numbers. So S is the name, P is the phone number, along with the specific node. And it'll just return the children. It'll iterate through that and it'll do a pushback operation. So as you know, pushback appends to a vector. I also have to set the parent to my node here because you need to have each child point to its correct parent. And then lastly, I just set my children like this. Notice how I'm not just directly assigning it. I'm calling methods to set the children and to get the children because those are private variables. It's good programming practice to do that. Now this method here is not my code. Company.returnEmployees is taken from a website called geeksforgeeks.com. It's a code to print your tree in 2 dimensions. And I took it from there, so I'm going to actually cite that in my readme file, which I'm going to upload soon. Because obviously it's not my code, so I don't want to pretend to say it's mine. It belongs to someone else, and I'm going to mention that very clearly. So this code does a depth first search and prints the tree in 2D. On the Geeks for Geeks website, it's explained very, very well, so you can check it out there. To return the name of my company, I have one method here. To find the node, so this method is mine. It does a depth first search. It'll search for the node iteratively. It'll search for the node recursively like this and then finds it. If it does not find the node, it'll just return the null object. I have a reset methods here, return my found node. And this, the delete node method is from my previous video. It's the same algorithm. I had to change it a bit because of the private variables, but the underlying architecture is the same. And watch that video for more details on how you can do this yourself. Since it is an n-ary tree, it's not simply a binary tree or a binary search tree. It's more complex and there's 4 cases you need to look at. Moving on, I have a method to change my parent. So here I just find my node. If it's a null, it'll just return the root. But if it does equal the string argument as my input, it'll return the node and then remove it from the old parent and then set to the new parent like this. And quickly assign the new parent again. And also set children, set the vector. Lastly, I have a method to reset the employee string. So now that's done for the backend, and let's move on to the UI implementation. So now let's move on to the UI. Let's begin with the main window, the most simple page. This one just takes in a string argument and then I press next and it'll open setup company window. So that's what this looks like here. So this is simply XML. You can drag and drop widgets and move things around. It's nice that Qt has this. I believe any program that lets you design a UI, for example, Android Studio, and there's so many more of them, you can actually drag and drop things because it just makes things faster. Next, I have setup company window.ui. This one, you can assign the leader and then set the leader names, employees. So this is a bunch of more widgets here. I have a prompt, I have my text label, which is the company name. It'll have buttons for continuing, which takes in the inputs from here and then processes them. Same with add employees and then next. Press next, it'll open up the edit company window, which is this window here, my last window. And this one is the most important because here you can do all the hiring, firing, changing boss and edit employee. So this was created with a tab widget, as you can see there. There's many tutorials on Qt how to add widgets. It's quite simple. I think the UI design is the most simple part of the code. The complex parts are integrating the UI with the backend and doing it efficiently because you don't want to repeat things as much as possible. So let's now move on to the UI classes. So in Qt you have a main file which calls in everything else. So let's begin with this one here. Alright, so this is my main window class and let's begin. I have first an icon and a theme file, and those are included in the resources folder. And if you want to know how that's done, I'll put a separate link in the description below. Main will have an instance of main window. So when you first start the program, it'll open up main window, right? Because that's what your first window is. It'll set the icon and then open it. So let's move on to main window here. This one simply has a constructor which opens up the class and shows the UI on the screen, and a destructor that deletes everything. I also have one button in my main window that takes in the argument of the company name and the text input and then creates a new instance of the setup company window class, which has an constructor which will need the company name string, and then it'll show that. So this will call setup company window. So let's now go to this class here. In my constructor, I actually create a company object, which is right there. Company with that specified name. So this method here, I put it there because it's called a member initialization list. You can also put this method down here and it'll do the same thing. But it takes in a text argument because you need to have a company name. It'll disable a bunch of buttons at the start because I haven't assigned anything else. So the first method, which is very important, is to set the leader. So I have two inputs for the leader name and the leader phone. If any of these are empty, then it won't do it. It'll give you a prompt to have at least, there'll be something missing. So you need to fill in both those fields here. So if they're not empty, then I'll proceed with setting the company leader's name. And then I will enable a bunch of stuff, or actually disable it first, because I'm enabling other stuff. So I'll call in my continue company setup method. So this method will lead to this one here, which is right down there. So here I'm enabling a bunch of buttons to show the employees and so on. And this just enables things. It doesn't actually interact with the backend, except this one method here that returns the company name of the CEO and then sets the text to that. But that's it. So now this method here lets you type in the employee names and the phone numbers and process those. It'll just convert that to strings and then parse it. If they are the same size, it'll assign the children of the company, which is corresponding to the leader, which is the root node. And they have to be the same size because then the vectors will match. Otherwise you just get bugs and you'll have one node that's incomplete, and that's something you don't want. The parsing of employee inputs, I'm using a string stream to parse it by using comma delimiters. This is standard string manipulation. And lastly, I have the next button. If I click that, it'll create a new instance of the edit company window class, which takes in this company object that I've created all the way up here. So this company stuff you're seeing, this is the company object, right? And I want to pass it to my next window because I have a bunch of information which I need to use. So it'll pass it in like that. And then now let's move on to the edit company window class. Within my edit company window class, this is where all the hiring, firing, UI interactions are done. So it's a very long script, so I won't go through all of it, but I'll show you the highlights, which will help you understand it better. So my constructor is very big because I'm disabling a lot of things. Since I don't have any inputs, I just need to clear out everything at the start and set the company name label. So that's one backend interaction there. So that's my destructor. That's a method to update the company display, which calls in that method to give you a 2D string as a tree and then print that to the screen. So a method here which is important is the hire button. This one takes in names and phone numbers, parses them, gets the boss. If the boss exists, then it'll do it, but if it does not, then it'll give you a prompt saying employee not found. If the size matches of my parse inputs return variable, then it'll add the children. If not, then it'll give you a prompt saying extra names or phone numbers. When I do hire people, I have to reset my string, so then the person can add more inputs if they want to. So I have a reset methods here. To parse the inputs, I'm doing the same exact string stream operation as before, but I'm just passing in 2 arguments instead of 1. For employee search, now this one is for the firing tab, but I need to know initially the user has to have an idea of the employee status, right? Is he reporting to someone? Is he or she reporting to nobody? Is he or she the boss? I don't allow firing the boss. Actually I do, but it's a very specific case there. But here I'm just seeing if the employee reports to nobody, then they have no children. If they report to one person, then it's 1 children here, and then I enable certain options based on that because I don't want the user to put a false input at the start. It's good to give prompts and then the user will have a better idea of what they want to do. Now these radio buttons here, when I toggle them, I show a bunch of next steps, and if you saw in my UI how I did it, this will make sense to you. A radio button should normally toggle more options or like disable options that which are not relevant. For this one here, employee replace button, I just taken a new name, a new argument, and then replaces that like this. So it'll take the same node and then edit the details, set the new name and the phone number, and then clear and reset a bunch of things so the user can once again do it if they want to. So firing the button like this, the fire radio button has this function here, fire and promote all. And this one here is very important, fire and promote all. So it'll just take in the children, and if it matches the employee's input name, so employee mod name here, it'll trigger a flag and then exit this loop and then delete the node and promote everyone. So I have that argument there. And this just updates and resets everything here. Fire and promote one is similar, but it's a bit shorter. It's just promoting one person. Finding the boss of an employee just gives you the parent node. And obviously I have a prompts if it does not match the inputs or the node isn't there. So here if it's a null pointer, it'll just give you a prompt saying employee is not found. So you see how this code is a bunch of prompts, and it's just how the UI interacts with the user. Every time you design a UI application, be it a website or a desktop application or even an app, you need to give prompts if the inputs are incorrect. So this is what this is doing for the most part. I do have several backend interactions, yes, but the prompts seem to take up most of my code here, as you can see, right? I'm enabling this, disabling that, and that is a part of UI design. So that's it for my code breakdown. It is on my GitHub, so you can take a look there. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching if you stayed this long. I don't want to go over it line by line because that'll just make you fall asleep, and like obviously nobody has time to do that, right? So if you want to download the source code, you can do so. You can download Qt Creator, it's free, and then process this yourself. And if you want to make any updates, you can do it. It's a good start for UI applications. This will be the first of many projects to come. So with that being said, take care, see you in the next video, bye.